Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a goals reset. Most people do this at the halfway point in the year, but we're a month away from the halfway point in the year. It's just the beginning of June as I'm filming this, and I already know that I'm not doing well. So why not take the opportunity now at the start of this month, sort of feels like a mini fresh start, like reset my goals now and try and do better moving forward. I will insert some footage of the reading journal where I go through the goals. What I'm doing this year, if you haven't seen my other reading journal videos, is I last year started tracking my stats for the first time just to sort of see where I was at. Then for 2022, I actually set some goals, and now I am looking at 5 months of stats, and I am going to reevaluate what I'm doing, actually look at the goals that I have set for myself and see if there are goals that need to be tweaked. The Q3 check-in, again, I will see if I am achieving these goals. Let's go back to the goals that I set for myself in the beginning of the year. For this year, I had 6 goals. Read 100 books, which I am well on my way to doing. Actually, I've read more in the first 5 months of this year than I have in the past. Last year, I made it to 89 books with a goal of 100 books. Number 2 is to read what I own. So in 2021, 43% of my reading was a new buy, 12% of it was borrowed, 22% of it was a reread, which meant that 22% of the books that I was reading came from my owned and unread TBR, which is massive from like 4 years of collecting things working as a bookseller and almost 10 years of being on BookTube and just being exposed to titles that I'm interested in all the time. So I have a massive unread book collection. I have a little chalkboard that I update. I have 315 unread books currently. This year my goal was to read 70% of my reading from the TBR because I knew that I had some rereading. I set myself a reread TBR, and I knew that I was going to host 2 book clubs this year, and I was allowing myself to buy new books for the book club. So I knew that some of it was going to be new buys, but I wanted it to be very, very narrow. This is the goal that I need to sort of revisit because currently 20% of my reading is a new buy. In the first 5 months purchasing books for the book club, it's within the rules, and it's 20%. 20% of my reading is also rereads, so if you're looking at the stats for last year, it's around the same. I'm doing around the same amount of rereading, despite the fact that I have specifically set for myself a reread TBR to try and reread some more, because that is something that I really enjoyed doing when I was younger. I was an avid rereader. So that number hasn't really changed. So 17 of the 50 books that I have read came from my TBR, which is not even half. It's 34%. And the big thing that I am realizing is instead of buying books, I am borrowing new books from the library. The best/worst thing was learning that my local library had partnered with 5 other libraries' digital collections. And so before, if my library didn't have the title, it'd be like, oh well, whatever. Now I can flip between the collections of 6 different libraries, the digital collections of 6 different libraries, and oftentimes find something like in a skip the line copy if it's really popular on BookTube, if it's being talked about quite a bit. Like, there's no big wait for it. What I was finding is the really hot titles that I saw all over the place, I'd look at my library holds and it'd be like, 6 years from now this becomes available, and I'd be like, cool, and I'm still on the holds list for a lot of those books. Who knows if I'll be interested in it by the time the hold comes to me, but now that I have access to 6 libraries with this digital partnership, it's very easy to find and follow some of the trendier books. The trendier books will be like in a skip the line edition at one of the partnered libraries, or the wait list will be like 2 people or 0 people, so I can grab that copy right away. The plus side is I am using my library services, which is always good. And I'm glad that I'm using the library instead of bringing these things into my house. I'm not spending money on this. The bad thing is that I'm not tackling what I own because I'm using the library. Now, I do have a job that allows me to listen to audiobooks while I do somewhat mindless tasks during the day. And so that's where the majority of this is coming from, but it also makes it very tempting to like continue to listen and just multitask. So like at the end of the day, instead of picking up a physical book for my TBR, I am continuing with the audiobook that I was listening to at work. So I think I need to evaluate how I am using the library if I want to read what I own. So maybe instead of looking for the new hot books, I use the library to find audiobooks for some of the titles that I already own and listen to them as audiobooks during the day. Like, this might not work with all of the titles here, but there are definitely titles here that I think would work well as audiobooks, and that maybe I should look for those from the library. So I'm still entertaining myself during the day through the more mindless admin tasks at work, but I'm also tackling my TBR. So that is a goal that I would like to update, is getting more specific with my library usage. Maybe 50% of my reading should be coming from my TBR. So number 3 of my original reading goals was to follow my no-buy rules, which was to unsubscribe from book emails, only buy book club books, only buy the next book in the series if I'm going to read it right away, and that I can make a wish list treat once a quarter. So far, I have done this, and I feel like with the exception of one book that I sort of stretched for. So it is not a book club book that I host, but it was a book club that I was interested in participating in, and I purchased that book. Moving forward, I am going to make it I can only buy book club books for book clubs that I am hosting. Everything else I still feel like is fair. Like if I wanted to buy the next book in a series because I find something in the TBR really interesting and I want to follow that, I think because ultimately this is about enjoying the stuff that I've collected, I think that's still a fair rule, and I haven't abused it or stretched it in any way, so I'm okay with that. And the wishlist treat I have followed. I did allow myself one book at the end of Q1. At the end of Q2, so at the end of June, I'm going to go through the wish list that I have made. I haven't really been putting things on a Q2 wish list. I started it initially, but then I discovered this library partnership thing and I just started borrowing things instead of putting them on the wish list. I'm still going to go through the exercise of looking at things that I would have impulse purchased for Q2, but I don't know that I'm going to allow myself to purchase a new book just because I have been borrowing so much. So that is something that I'm going to sort of hold myself accountable to. In terms of author diversity, I have been doing, I'm going to say quite poorly. My goal was to read more women, 70% women, 30% other genders. I have read 80% women, 20% other genders. I am not achieving, in fact, I am drastically underachieving in terms of reading BIPOC authors and queer authors. Now, part of that is that I am not buying new books, and what I have collected is a lot of white authors. I'm realizing that it may not be possible to read like 50% of my TBR and achieve the numbers that I want in terms of author diversity. And that is something that will slowly change as my collection changes, as my buying changes. So once I reduce the collection to a place where I feel like I can just decide to purchase a couple books, at that point, obviously, will be when I will be making buying decisions that have author diversity, expanding my reader horizons in the way that I hadn't in the past. I think I'm going to be staring in the face how bad I have been at diversifying my reading in the past, because I am reading my past, right? I am literally reading my past choices. I think I'm just going to sort of collect these stats And hopefully as we move forward, actually it might be interesting to look at how many of my new buys are BIPOC authors, how many of my new buys are queer authors, see where the bulk of these statistics are coming from. That I think would be the better thing to do. I set myself some TBRs. I broke them up into a couple of different categories. I had a reread category. I've reread 1 of 5. I had 30 books to read in 2022. I've picked away at 10 of those. This is obviously a bit of a stretch goal, I think, setting this thing. So where does that leave me? I think I need to be mindful about what I'm borrowing and prioritizing this TBR. I wanted to make this video just to sort of revisit the goals, look at the statistics, look at what I have collected, what I'm actually doing versus the goals that I have set. So the one thing that I mentioned is I wanted 70% for my TBR. I think that 70% is too high. Like, just math. 70% is probably just unrealistic with the rereading goals. Like the new buys for book club even wouldn't have been 30%. Like, it's just, math is not my strong suit. There's a reason why I am a humanities person and not a math person. But I think that it would not be unrealistic if I'm stretching for 10 books a month to make 5 of those 10 books something that comes from here. I don't think that's unrealistic. So I think setting the goal of 50% of the books coming from the TBR is much more doable, and I want to update that as well. More than anything, doing this no by year is trying to teach myself a different mindset around books and consuming books, and the purchasing of books, right? Like, having worked in the bookstore for so long, it was so easy to bring things into my collection uncritically. So this is more about that, like, shift in mentality, that shift to, I guess, distancing myself. I say this literally in front of a wall of books, but distancing myself from the idea that I have to own all of the books that I want to read. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on reading goals. Have you set any? How is your reading year going so far? I did just want to quickly plug that the June small book club book is Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainford. This is a weird, tender, haunted, and deeply affecting spectacle. And apparently the less you know about it, the better. So I don't want to say more than it's like feminist folk and fairy vibes, like a fairy tale with women's liberation involved. I like everything that I'm hearing about it. I am hosting a live stream discussion on Monday, June 27th at 7:30 p.m. EST. We'll chat about this. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you are doing well, that you are staying safe, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye.